time to spill the secrets.
This is Universal Secrets with Tiffany Mack and Kevin Hale.
It is Tuesday night. You know what that means.
It's Universal Secrets with Tiffany Mack and Kevin Hale. Can I get a hail yeah?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Again on this Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Kevin, how was your day?
Busy work day as usual.
You ready for tonight's show?
I am messaging you earlier, texting you earlier, and telling you to check on something in our Gmail, and you were telling me you were going shopping for school clothes.
Yes. Couldn't wait.
Because someone's going to be in high school.
Okay. Yes.
I've been there and done that a few times.
Details. We can't.
Yeah.
Less
not
details.
Bad. No baby. Yeah. They're not babies anymore.
No, they're not. Yeah.
We are streaming Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Chat room is happening. Appreciate you all. Welcome to our jungle. Tiffany, you know, we're season 4, call it season 4, reboot 4, whatever. We always find a way to go back to our go-to topic.
Our roots.
Those things in the sky.
Mysterious little lights.
Lights and possibly what's inside those things in the sky.
Mm-hmm. I'm ready. You know, my daughter, my youngest, and I sat out not last night. It was too cloudy, but the 2 previous nights sat outside and watched the stars. And of course we have our night vision, and we're looking through and we're watching all these things in the sky, and you can identify a lot of them. You know, they're planes, they're satellites, they're stars, so much that you can see, right? And then you put that little set of goggles up and you're like, holy crap, what is going on? You can see so much more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we saw 3 that were very unique and suspicious. So I just let her, you know, if she thinks that it's UFOs, I just let her think it. If it's not, you know, no harm, no foul.
Did you see it too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you rule out satellites?
I did. Ruled out satellites, ruled out planes. Yeah, ruled out. Yep. It was interesting. It's these summer nights that I really like going out and watching for them. So I can't call them in like a few people that we've had on in the past, like Christopher Bledsoe and
CE5 people.
The CE5 people, yes. Yeah. I tell them to flash me all the time, and it doesn't necessarily happen. I just flash them back.
I was going to say, yeah. And like I knew you would.
Yeah. Hey guys, peekaboo. See if they get tempted to come on down and visit. Yes.
That explains the crashing UFOs, because
maybe.
they you know, they're like nose diving. We got to get to her
before she puts them away.
They forgot to hit the brakes before they. Yeah. All right, Tiffany, what's going on tonight?
Well, tonight we have a gentleman by the name of Shane Hurd. He has spent nearly 25 years in the government, and he is a civil engineer, a Geographic Information Systems and Information Technologies, and is a graduate of Arizona State University's Certified Public Manager program. And as a member of the space race generation, he has been a lifelong space and science nerd fan and science-fi geek. We love this kind of guy. It was the Phoenix Lights incident in his hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, that sparked his interest in UFOs. So since that time, he has studied the subject intently, and ultimately in 2015 joined MUFON, then became a MUFON Field Investigator in 2017. He's now a STAR team member, a field investigator trainer, a member of the Experiencer Resource Team, and is the Assistant State Director for Arizona MUFON. In June of 2020, he published his first book entitled Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, The Beginner's Guide to Researching UFOs, and he has appeared on Ancient Aliens, History's Greatest Mysteries with Lawrence Fishburne, other television and radio programs, and various podcasts, and ours now, correct? We're so excited to introduce Mr. Shane Hurd.
Yeah, now it's one more thing to add to his resume.
That's right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Shane, welcome, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
MUFON. Let's go right at it. Let's share with him your first. Let's warm him up. Your first encounter.
So it's the Mutual UFO Network, right? So
Right.
this is a place that people go to report sightings, and they have, I can't even tell you how many investigators, maybe Shane knows, but back in 2014, 2015, and my brain is foggy, and at some point I will go back and look at the actual date, but it was in October of that year, and I was down in Destin, and I've told the story a million times, but it is still significant because it is what brought me into this world. I was a journalism major, and I did national public radio and things like that growing up, which I really enjoyed to a degree, but now I sort of separated it from my life and went on and did other things, right? And so in 2014, 2015, that October, and it was a full moon, it was absolutely gorgeous, crystal clear, no movement on the water. It was still. I was overlooking the ocean, and I saw this massive bright white light, the brightest white that I'd ever seen. And it went down into the water, and all I saw was like a disbursement of light under the water. And it didn't look like it even did anything to the surface, which was really strange to me, because something this big and coming straight down seems like it would have had like a ripple effect and waves and everything, but I don't remember that. So the first person I talked to was my roommate from college, who was actually in the Air Force at the time, and her husband was an instructor for the F-35s, and he's gone all over the world to train the F-35 pilots. So, we talked a little bit about it, and I was like, there has got to be somewhere that I can report this or see who else saw it, and I reached out to, the people at Eglin Air Force Base, which was close to me. And I asked if there were any kind of night activities that they were doing. And they were like, nope. And they click, it was just, nope, don't know what you're talking about. Didn't see anything. And that was the end of that.
They didn't say flares.
Nothing. They said nothing should have been out over the water that night at that time. So that, with that information, I started searching, and I'm sure I'm just among all of the other people that have found MUFON just through searching the internet. There was a wealth of information like leaning towards MUFON, go here to report it. And that was really, the other one was, I believe, NICAP. And so I didn't even report it to NICAP. I just sort of reported it to MUFON and just left it like that. And then I get calls from, these people wanting me to do podcasting. It's like, crap. Didn't think I was really going to get drugged back into this NPR and all this radio stuff. But now it's even progressed beyond that. Now we've got video chats, and it's like crazy.
Now you host your own podcast.
I know, right? Yeah.
Very cool.
But then we found,
don't throw rocks, Tiffany.
I know. And this sucker over here, Mr. Kevin Hale, give me a hell yeah, found me on KGRA and like finessed me to come over and join his dark side. So, but yeah, so MUFON is one of those places that people can go to report. And tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the program, and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. So I I never really had an intense interest on UFOs, growing up, but an awareness and a mild interest.
That's how I was.
And
Yes.
yeah. And then, got married, started having kids, trying to get a career going, and really didn't pay any attention to it. Also was religious at the time, pretty religious. And that was, so consuming. I really had no bandwidth left to pursue, that interest. However, in 1997, here we experienced the Phoenix Lights incident. I live here north of Phoenix. And I know exactly where I was at the time, what I was doing, although I didn't see it. However, the actions of the media, the military, the government, the police, and the general public was like this case study right before my very eyes about, what kind of impact this made on our community. And it was really significant. It took a few months, and then it hit the national news, and then it went real crazy, So that absolutely got my attention, but I still wasn't ready to dive in yet. But around 2010, I decided, I'm going to start looking into this in earnest. And so I started reading every book I could get my hands on, and movies and documentaries and that whole thing. And after a few years of kind of really educating myself, getting involved with Facebook and people in the community, I finally got to a point where I said, I want to do more than just read about other people's experiences. I wanted to have my own. I wanted to participate. I wanted to play. I wanted in that sandbox, And so the first book I read was The Day After Roswell, written by Bill Burns and Philip Corso. After I got done reading it, I was actually a little bit more skeptical. That one, had some interesting things, but it felt like a stretch to me in a lot of ways, and I almost gave up. But it just so happened that Linda Kane's book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, and she's a investigative journalist, and she approached
Linda or Leslie?
Leslie.
Leslie.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Leslie.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry,
Oh, yeah.
Leslie.
No, that's okay.
And so when I read that, I'm like, okay, very cool. Here we've got good information and bad information, right? Like our world is full of that. So you have to be very discerning. But it sparked my interest enough that I continued. And then one of the things I wanted to do, as I said, was to get more involved. And I've worked in the government now close to 25 years, and I know I could function and thrive in a big organization, and MUFON certainly qualified as that. And, as I looked around, I saw, MUFON's really, ufology is really broad, right? You've got everything from, crop circles to abductions to, investigations, and just all these facets. And it seemed to me like, you kind of got to pick a lane and get in that lane, what interests you most, because you're not going to do a real good job spreading yourself too thin. And to me, when I saw MUFON, it gave the opportunity to be an investigator, and that really appealed to me. And again, being in engineering and that kind of thing, I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. I'm a mechanic as well, and just all these other things. So it really fit the bill for me. And so I did join, but I kind of just laid back and, absorbed more. And then finally, I made the commitment to become an investigator, and that led to, becoming assistant director. And so now I'm, up to here in MUFON, and I'll just say about MUFON. MUFON is a unique organization in the field of ufology in that they're really certainly the largest organization, and they investigate, as opposed to other organizations that might just take a report like NUFORC. NUFORC, they don't investigate, but they take and compile the data that they get in their reports, and that's useful, and I'm not diminishing it at all. But I wanted some real hands-on stuff, so I did join. I became an investigator, and now I have a couple hundred cases under my belt. I also became a member of the ERT, which specializes in helping people who have had experiences or contact or abductions. And so there's sort of a bifurcation in MUFON. There's the investigative side, which I will say is fairly intrusive, right? You report something, I'm going to come talk to you and I'm going to ask you what, where, when, why, how. And it's a bit probing, right? I mean, it's done respectfully and all that. But with a person who's had an experience, you don't want to do that, because they may range from, mildly interested to completely traumatized. And you don't want them to come and seek help and get quizzed or, probed, no pun intended on that. We just accept what they have experienced and then provide them tools to cope with it. It might be resources like hypnosis or, a support group. And so that really appealed to me, because when I first started out, I have to say I was a nuts and bolts guy, right? It's like, hey, what is that machine right there in the sky doing? And it's not explainable. That really appealed to me. But
that's the IT guy. That's the engineer in you.
Yeah, so absolutely.
You've already established having some, not comments, being smart. I'll say it. I'm an IT guy too. Well, I'm smart too. So.
Well, I don't know about that, but that, that definitely interested me. But as I've gained experience, I realized that's actually a small part of the phenomena, the nuts and bolts part. There's a whole nother side to it. And, I'll just, the popular term now for it is really its consciousness. And that is the greater part of this issue. And so, I've evolved, and I always say, like, tonight, I'm going to tell you about my opinions and viewpoints, and they're based on my experience. But I also want to say that I'm entitled to changing my mind when I get new evidence, right? So I may have said or felt one way, 2-3 years ago, and it's changed because I've had more experience. So I do like to qualify my conversation that way. And there are some things we have facts for, and then there's things that we don't. But let me just explain a little bit about an investigation for people so they really kind of understand where MUFON comes from. Because, there are people that are happy with MUFON and people that aren't happy with MUFON, right? But remember, any organization is made up of people, individual humans, and we have different personalities and backgrounds and all that. So, things can happen. But MUFON is a worldwide organization, has some 5,000 members, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 investigators, again, worldwide. And then that international organization is the umbrella for the United States organization. And that organization is set up with chapters, almost like a franchise, but not quite, but chapters that are regional. So like the Arizona chapter, we handle all the cases for the state of Arizona, for example. But there
it's a UFO fraternity.
Yeah. And then there's chapters back east, though, or like up north where there's less population, and they might be responsible for a couple states, in their chapter. So it's not like 50 chapters, one for each state, but there are many chapters. So, and each chapter, their responsibility is to, investigate those cases that come across MUFON.com. So if a person has seen something they would like to report it, they just go to MUFON.com, report a UFO, and then they're going to go through a series of questions that really end up populating the database. And it's things like, of course, who, what, where, and when, but a lot of things like descriptions of the object that they've seen and its behavior and, all sorts of things, maybe about like 200 data points. And once that's done, it's submitted to headquarters. They have a team that triages it and assigns it to a scale developed by Dr. J. Allen Hynek and by, now brain cramping on his name, Jacques Vallée. And it's a way to rate the cases in terms of their, potential for being a true unknown. So very common is lights in the sky, right? It's at night, it's dark, and you see a little light up there, and it behaves in a strange way. That's worth reporting, certainly. But from an investigator's point of view, there's not a lot I can do with that. You know, a bright white light on a black background almost has no data. At least in a video, it moves and you can make some assumptions off that. But an investigation is really a process of elimination. You go from what could be the most obvious explanation and keep working your way down until you get to, hey, it's an unknown, a true unknown. And I always like to tell folks that, look, I wasn't there. I didn't see what you saw. There's a lot more data you collected that you're probably not even communicating to me. You know, you might have felt a certain way. Maybe you heard something or smelled or tasted something, and just those sorts of things. And often when you're in a fairly traumatic event, a lot of things miss you because you get so focused on the thing that's got your attention, right? So again, you try and tease that out in an interview with the person who's made the report. We can do that interview over the phone or in person, depending on circumstances, and you tease out more data. And then, you know, we have a system and a series of tools, like you can identify what aircraft was in that location at that date and time with certainty, right? Or we use astronomical applications and software that you can actually create a video of exactly what that person saw in the sky at that date, time, and location, right? What planet and all that thing. And there's a lot of other tools like that. Again, we're eliminating, you know, the most obvious. Did you see a star? Did you see a helicopter? And then other things. So I just like to explain that so that folks don't get their hopes up. It's not like I can come to you and say, you saw, you know, a ship from Pleiadia or whatever. That'll never happen because I wasn't there and I didn't see it. And the data that we have to work with is limited. However, many times I'm going to say my record of unknowns versus IFOs or identified flying objects is about 10%. So some people it may be 5, some maybe 11 or 12, but generally I hover around the 10% range. And there's really no control you have over that. It just, over enough cases, that becomes the percentages of unknown. So, you know, it's fascinating for me. I love it. I like people. I like to talk to people. And I like the scientific and investigative aspect of trying to solve that puzzle. And so it's really been a great thing for me. I really love doing it. And I'm going to retire in about 18 months, and I look forward to doing MUFON stuff more full time.
That's awesome. You know, I have to admit, I pulled the MUFON site up and shared it. Report a UFO. I knew that you can do that there, but I didn't realize there was a link that you could report an abduction or non-human contact.
Yes.
And you don't need to go, but I would like to know percentage-wise, how many of those are actually being reported?
Yeah, so that we don't know. Honestly, we don't know. And some people feel
like, on MUFON, you wouldn't know that. If I'm saying as far as
you mean are you saying the percentage of people that report an abduction in relation to the reporting the sighting of a UFO?
Yes. Okay. That's what I'm good at. My bad.
Actually, that is not as common as you would think.
Yeah.
Many abduction reports do not contain a sighting. Now, the circumstance, it's so unique. The circumstances are just, I mean, there are certain commonalities to abduction cases or contact or experiences. Things like the people have had an NDE in their life, near-death experience, you know, missing time, the sighting of orbs, electrical issues in their home, the sensation that there's somebody on their bed. There's just a lot of touchstone facets to it that are common, but the circumstances are so varied. It's wild. But a statistic I would share would be that some people feel that the number of reports versus the actual sightings is like 10%.
Yeah.
So if there's 100 sightings, there's probably really 10 times that, you know. But personally, I think the number is far greater. I think it's 1 in 1,000. And here's why. Think about it. You guys are kind of aware of ufology and everything. But if you're a person who's never heard a thing about it, would you even know that there's a place to report it?
That's the
for
problem.
one thing. And then even if you did, would you? Because, you know, there's that stigma, there's that fear of ridicule, there's that self-doubt that I think is extremely powerful and prevents.
Yeah, but the thing is that people who go through that experience and have the wherewithal to go and look it up and see that there is a site, they're already they have already decided that they want to go forward and report it. But then there was a lot of anonymity because you could just do it on a website. You don't have to give any information. There's really nothing that you have to do that would come back on you. Now we can research the commentary, research everything about it. And it's a lot more you have to put in your email address or your phone number or this and that. And it can come back to you. Those reports can. So if you have any qualms at all, they're probably not going to report it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a big factor. So imagine this. I know that we have over 100,000 cases in our case management system now, but that only came online, you know, a decade or so ago. There's probably another 100,000 in boxes in a warehouse, you know, paper copies. Now, MUFON has a program where they're imaging all of that, and much of it is done, if not complete. You know, that's to me just incredible amount of data. And when you can take that data and look at it qualitatively and quantitatively and make some really good assumptions. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, I forgot her name. She wrote the UFO desk reference. And
Cheryl Costa?
Yep, Cheryl Costa. Okay. And that's a great illustration of somebody making use of the data and doing something with it, right?
Yes.
And so I've got a copy of that on my desk. There you go. All right.
I can't see very well there.
Good one.
Well, I tried. Cheryl, I tried.
So, you know, and that's really what MUFON's mission is. It is to collect the data and then make it available for research. And, you know, in fact, we have been, you know, working cooperatively with the United States government and AARO and providing information there. And it's just part of the fact that we're kind of a clearinghouse for that data, and collect not just military cases or pilot cases, but cases from everybody from every walk of life.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Shane. You know, in December 2017, speaking of Leslie Kean, the Times article, you know, that whole, it was 2017, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. December 2017.
Yeah.
Yep, December.
The fact that it hit a major publication, and then from there, a lot of, you know, I don't know, not a lot, but it became mainstream conversation. So from that date, from December 2017 till now, has the reports like picked up? Was there a spike where people were like, oh shit, you know, okay, maybe I can tell my story. Maybe I'm not. So, you know.
Absolutely. 100%. In fact, I'm not here to plug my book, but what I want to say
we
is
will.
that event is what really caused me to want to write this book, because what I felt was that was a significant lifting of the taboo and the ridicule for people to talk about UFOs. And we saw that expressed by Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and Steve Justice and all of those folks who were high-level government scientists coming out and, admitting the reality of this. And so I thought, a lot of people who were, interested but kept it private because they didn't want to deal with the ridicule would begin to genuinely start researching it. And so I know when I first started to research it, you kind of have to fall down a few rabbit holes before you get to the really good information. It just works that way. So the reason I wrote the book was really to help newly interested people come in, again, a beginner's guide to researching, investigating, and understanding UFOs, and avoid some of the rabbit holes that, like at first, I might not have. There it is. I may not have continued if it weren't, based on that first book I read. And thankfully, I gave it one more shot, and then I found credible information. So, and I'm not saying the day after Roswell is not credible. I'm just saying at that moment in time, that is exactly the way I felt, and it really influenced me. But so I wanted people to just get off on the right foot with this book, and it just goes into, here are the issues of ufology. Here's the things that you want to look at. Here's the things that you don't want to look at, type of thing. And I kind of framed it out so that it was a logical progression, identifying what UAP was and what is an investigation, and, what is misinformation and disinformation, and kind of just goes on, and, looking at what good data is and good evidence, and that, the wheat and chaff of ufology, I call it, good and bad information, and then, talk about disclosure and what that is, and just all of those things, so that people just get it isn't a heavy book, and they just get a good primer, so that when they do jump in, they have a BS meter and it's calibrated. Let's put it that way. That was the goal. But that. Yes, that's a seminal event in ufology. Really, in 80 years, I think it's the most consequential development in that 80 years.
I see your forward by Jason McClung. That's another good dude.
I love
Just
Jason.
saying. We love.
Oh, you guys know Jason?
Yeah.
He's my bud.
He's a good dude. I gotta, Shane, you touched on it, alluded to it earlier. There is kind of the negativity with MUFON, and I'm going to share this, and this, please, it's just play along.
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah, Maria, I never reported to MUFON or else field investors gather info from the CMS and put all reports in books to make money. Or, I've heard that, and I'm plugging your book, and someone might say, "Oh, okay." His book, though, is a little different. It's a beginner's guide to UFOs. I haven't read your book, so I don't know if you're taking something and just, blowing it up in your book so you get that movie deal or anything. I don't think that's the case here, but fair foul when it comes to the reputation of MUFON.
Yeah. So I actually talk about it in the book, that part of the things that you got to be really careful of is misinformation. True. And let's put it this way: if you've written a book, it takes time, effort, and money, and you usually don't make any money, right? And versus today, you've got YouTube, websites, you got your phone, you got everything where now it's monetized, right? So you can quickly put together some things, put them on there, and you have a minimal investment of time, effort, money in doing so, and stand a chance of making some real money, right? So as with anything, I say you have to consider the source, and you have to multi-source, and you have to make some decisions about the credibility of that source. Okay, that being said, I don't have a problem with people making money off ufology if it in fact is, if they are genuine and if they are really making an attempt to educate others. That to me is appropriate. And so I have many friends in ufology that have written wonderful books, and some of them, yeah, they actually make some money. More power to them. You know, I mean, think about it. I know I've put thousands of hours of effort into this. I don't want to be paid for it. It's my interest. That's why I'm doing it. But just think about that, you know, people, you know, legitimately learn something. They know their stuff, and they communicate it to others to help them grow. I support that. What I don't support is the nonsense we see, and I'm not going to name any of these, but we know what they are. They're very sensationalistic. They have video after video, and it's very sensationalistic, and that to me is a big red flag, and one of the rabbit holes you don't want to fall down, right? And think about just this little piece of logic. If there was a video out there that was proof, we'd all know about it. It would be on Fox News and CNN. There would be no doubt, right? And so you gotta, I'm not saying there aren't legitimate videos of UFOs out there, but the big sensationalistic ones that, we've seen them, and that's a problem. So I just say, develop a BS meter, calibrate it, make sure that you are filtering what you're seeing and hearing, and understand, there are people that are trying to take advantage, but there are also some very legitimate and sincere people out there. It's just buyer beware, I guess, is what I say. But again, that's something I talk about in the book pretty extensively, so that people don't get duped and then get discouraged and drop it. And that would be sad, because that might be the person that cracks this case, right, in the future. You never know. So, and the more people that are educated on this, the more we can hold the government accountable. I'm sure we'll talk about that. So to me, it's just highly important to get the information out, good, credible information, however you do it, free or paid.
So what are some of the misconceptions people have about UFO sightings and the phenomena, and how did you claim to rectify that in your book or clarify?
Yeah, so I think one of the most significant is misidentification. So let me explain. Because 90%, let's say, in my experience, 90% of these reports, you can identify what it was they saw as a prosaic, earthbound explanation. So planets, stars, meteors, airplanes, satellites, that kind of thing. And so that is a huge number when you think about it. And so why does that happen, right? So I'm not suggesting that people aren't intelligent, and they don't understand necessarily what they're looking at, but you got to consider the circumstances. So, you might be, for example, in a unfamiliar area. Maybe you're camping, or, somebody else's place or whatever. You're unfamiliar with the surroundings, and something happens and it just looks unusual and out of place. And that's legitimate, right? It's happened to me. Or,
Are you talking swamp gas and fairy lights?
Yeah, any of it, really,
Okay.
and again, I don't want to demean anyone or suggest that they're easily fooled. It's just when you're out of your element, unexpected circumstances and things happen, it can seem weird or out of place where it might not normally. And so, and then sometimes you're with other people and you get all excited and you kind of, feed off each other and that sort of thing. So I think misidentification certainly is the largest chunk of the 90%. Another things are hoaxes, but hoaxes really are a very small percentage, maybe 1, 2, 3% at the most. And hoaxes kind of come in two categories. One would be the hoax where, you throw a pie pan up in the air and you take a picture of it and you pass it off for a UFO, right? You have actively tried to deceive, right? Then there's the kind of hoaxes that are just like, maybe you submit a false report to MUFON. Hey, I'm going to get these guys, kind of a thing. Or, there's kind of unintentional hoaxing. So like one of the common things we get are videos and photos that seem very anomalous. And let me just say right at the outset, there is no camera in the world like the human eye, okay? And everything else, every camera, I don't care how expensive it is, they have limitations. And we live in a world of optical illusions everywhere, all around us, all of the time. And again, if you're not perfectly oriented and understanding what's going on around you, you can make a misinterpretation of something. So again, it's just, another part of it is like I've seen, a lot of people will say, well, everyone's got a phone on this planet. Why don't we have a good video or picture of a UFO? Well, first of all, we do. We do have those. And secondly of all, it's a heck of a lot harder to get than you think it is, because a lot of times when you see something strange, again, your focus is so narrow on observing that you don't even think to pull out a camera and look. And even many experienced investigators and people within MUFON have had that same experience. We were just sitting there watching it and I didn't even think to get my camera out. And so I would just posit this illustration. If I said, Tiffany, I want you to go, you got 1 week to do it. I want you to go take me a picture of a pink Corvette. Okay. So A, where are you even going to find one? B, if one drove by, you're going to have time to pull your camera out and look at it. Well, how much more rare would be a UFO or a UAP that we know they exist, but we don't know what they are, versus a Corvette, you know what it is and that it exists.
The only time I've ever seen a pink Corvette was like Barbie.
Yeah.
The Barbie movie, the pink Corvette is the only thing that, yeah, I mean, I agree. It would be tough for someone to just say, hey, you've got a week, go find me a UFO. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. So, and I like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, from, scientific standpoint. But, he has his incentives to be,
to a degree.
Yeah. Not a fan of UFOs and thinks that it's, baloney, at least publicly. And that's one of the excuses he'll use is with all these phones, why don't we have great, we do. Some of these people are just talking heads though. Yeah.
And that's my problem with the UFO community is we have some people out there who really are in it to monetize and not necessarily are there to gain anything for humanity. It's a fad. It's popular. It's extremely popular and profitable right now. Yeah, and these shows are, we don't make a damn cent, but we're still here. And we've been doing this. Kevin and I have been doing this for 8 years on and off. And wow. I mean, it's not like it benefits us other than getting stories out there to people who have unique experiences. They want to know that they're not alone. They want to know more information. And that is what sort of bothers me about how the environment has changed over the past 8 to 10 years. It is extremely profitable. And the motivation for finding new topics and new material is so heavy on them that sort of bothers me a little bit,
Yeah.
because it's not back to the human consciousness. It's not back to what we are trying to connect with.
100%. Yeah, agree. And you know,
Not
time.
that making money is bad. I
I
don't
was
have a
gonna
problem with
say,
it.
Tiffany, I was
Not that
gonna
making
say,
money is
you know,
bad.
if we made $1, you know, it's $1 more than we started.
Yeah.
True. I know, but
And I get it. I mean, you guys probably have invested untold hours. I've had a couple podcasts and that. It takes a tremendous amount of research and work, time and effort away from your family.
and then finding decent people who have a story to share, and not just just.
And this shit, I'm paying this shit too, by the way.
Oh yes, I'm
StreamYard
sorry.
is not free.
It's not free, right?
Right.
All these other so, but anyway.
I was going to say it's at actually great cost, right?
Yeah.
Time, effort, money, personally. So,
but see, that shows your dedication to the topic. I mean, you are providing your services for the betterment of humanity. We want the truth, that's I give you props. I love the investigators who come on and share their stories, because this is the heart of how we get our information. And it's like checks and balances. There is a matter of factual information, and a lot of times we can look to see how accurate the information was. And that's, not that people don't accidentally make mistakes or misremember certain things. That's just part of human nature.
yeah.
And it's important, even those. I've heard a lot of people who've had issues with, we go back to the stigma of the stories. Not only that, a lot of people don't report their story for years, even decades. And those are the ones that you're just like, okay, you can only get little bits and pieces of what happened that time, and there's no way to corroborate it except for the Phoenix Lights. So many people saw it, took pictures. There's a lot of good information out there, but it's difficult to get to.
Speaking of that, Shane, or one person that I recall, it's been a few years, telling his story that he actually saw it, was Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
He was the one supposedly
he's a pilot, right? Well, I don't know. No, did he report it? I think
so.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
Actually report it? Okay. All right. Then
he was in fact, he was the private pilot who did make a report.
You're right.
He and his son were flying in.
Yes.
They saw it straight up, reported it to the air traffic control, and made an official UFO report. And then he completely forgot about it.
Exactly. I like that part.
Yeah. And then years later, Goldie was watching a UFO show about the case, and it struck him. Wait a minute, I'm that pilot. And he went and got his logbook, because they log everything. And sure enough, it was in there. Wow. And
why do you think that is? Okay, so let's go into that experience. You've done all this investigation and talked to witnesses throughout the years. Tell us what you think happened in that specific circumstance so many years previously, and it was so popular and seen by so many. Tell us what would make the human mind forget about something so significant.
I think there's two possibilities. One, as I mentioned, just the focus. He probably never gave a thought to UFOs prior, right? So clean slate there. And he's just focused on the moment, and nothing came of it, and then just kind of forgot about it. The other thing is, and I think there's clear evidence to suggest that people are influenced by the phenomena. Their thinking, their mind, their brain are influenced by the phenomena in some way. And so there's already quite a bit of data and studies on and this is really kind of one of the main focuses of the government, is the effect that they have on the human body. And so, like, one example I can give you is the Rendell-Shimforris incident. And John Burroughs was the individual who was in the proximity of the landed craft, and later in life, after he was discharged from the military, he had developed heart problems,
Mm-hmm.
and he tried to get his medical records, and they were classified. And it actually took John McCain, the senator here in Arizona, to step in his behalf to get those records released. Well, it turns out that there was a report, a very large report called the Condign Report from the UK that had performed studies, and there was a chart in there that showed from other cases than the Rendlesham how people who were in the proximity had certain health issues. This was documented, like, oh, a percentage of the people experience this and a percentage experience that. So there's clearly proof that there's some sort of physical impact from being in the proximity of these things. So whether it's the field, that their propulsion field, or whether it's some consciousness, maybe these crafts are flown really mainly by consciousness, or maybe there's, I guess what I'm getting at, an unintentional effect versus an intentional. And maybe there's intentional, like screen memories or memory loss, because people always share, not always, but in many cases talk about missing time. Well, what's missing time? That's an effect on your brain. So I mean, it's complex, and it's serious, and it's real. I mean, what it is, we don't have a complete handle on that yet, but we know that it is. The U.S. government has confirmed it, the military, the Navy, et cetera, et cetera. So we're dealing with a very real phenomena, just don't know its source.
Well, when you talk about some famous people who've had a missing time and maybe some physical ailments afterwards, Travis Walton said that he thought that he was maybe injured, and that's why they brought him on the craft, and that's why it took a few days for him to get back. Betty and Barney Hill both said that they had experimentation and they had pain after. When we hear these types of things happening, it doesn't sound like it was intentional for some. Same as John Burroughs. It doesn't sound like it was intentional. It just sounds like maybe they got too close to the radiation bottle. There's something that is just not native to our environment that we are very sensitive of. We're sensitive. We are a machine, but we're very sensitive. And I always say that I'm a delicate flower because I feel like I'm always got an ailment. But think about what kind of potential when it comes to extraterrestrial technology, what can it do to us? So our bodies weren't made to be close to those objects, I don't think.
Yeah. And even think about that, again, the engineering side of me, the scientific is, you wouldn't go stand next to a rocket.
Correct.
Or a jet engine.
Correct.
I mean, there's chemicals, there's heat, there's radiation, there's all of these things. Humans are pretty fragile. I mean, you throw us naked in the woods, we stand a good chance of not making it because of exposure and other things. Among the animal kingdom, if it weren't for our brains, we wouldn't survive. We're weak and frail comparatively. So yeah, and so that just makes sense. But that one of the things I always say is that, to me, UFOs, ufology, the study of UFOs is really about people, the impact on us, right? And the reason that's important to understand is, like, say, for example, there was the largest earthquake on Earth, let's say a 10.5 or whatever. Now, if that happened in the middle of nowhere, not a single person was harmed, not a structure, no animal, no nothing, versus if it happened in, San Francisco or New York City, it could be the greatest disaster in history in one case, just because of its proximity to people, versus if it happened in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't even be a disaster. So really everything circles around humans and human society. And I mean, in part, that's because we're anthropocentric, right? We are human centric. We think like humans, we act like humans, and we largely don't have the capacity to do it any differently, right? So this is why aliens are weird to us. You know, they might think in a completely different way than we do. And, you know, we have this mix of our intellect and our emotion and our physicality and our spirituality and all of those things. We're pretty complex beings, but we're pretty fragile. So to me, it's just very fascinating how this is a fact of our life, and probably has been, you know, for all of humanity, right? These experiences and contact with some other intelligence is not new, and it's just framed differently because of the level of society. So, you know, in the olden days, it was, you know, agrarian, and, you know, people didn't have airplanes and flying objects and stuff, but they report, you know, a flying shield in the sky, or, you know, is an angel coming down, or whatever. It's just the frame of reference is different.
Or a dragon breathing fire across the sky.
Yeah, of course. So
yeah.
So that's the other thing that we contend with, you know. And again, to me, that's all just very human. That is the human experience, and that UFOs is a part of the human experience, and always has been. And we, you know, now we're just discovering, you know, or developing technology that's helping us understand it better, you know. But we're clearly still not there yet. We're not over the top. We talk about, is it dimensional? Is it, you know, biological? Is it AI? Is it this or that? Is it, you know, inner Earth? I mean, we just have all these theories because we don't have quite what we need to make a true and positive identification that the public knows of. Let's just put it that way. That we in general are aware of.
With your permission, Tiff, I'd like to stay on the Phoenix Lights just a little bit longer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How is the Phoenix Lights not the most compelling UFO story event ever, when you have thousands of people who claim to have seen like a mile-long object? I don't know, you can frame it up as far as the size. I've heard the stories is that this thing was fucking huge, slowly hovering, silently, quietly, maybe hovering. Some people were saying they could probably throw, you know, a rock and hit it. What the hell? First of all, what the hell kind of man-made object could do that? And the fact that, again, this is
blimp.
The consensus that this a what?
A blimp.
Don't be a
Sorry.
party pooper.
I am a party pooper.
And it's still an object of that size.
Sure.
I mean, I'm dumbfounded how that is not like. I mean, that's if Roswell is the king, then that's, I don't know if that's, but it's right there.
Well, I agree with you. It's the largest recorded mass sighting in history.
Right.
And, you know, in the world of investigation, one eyewitness is good, but it's not proof of anything. You get 2 unrelated eyewitnesses or 3, you really got something. Think about it. In any court in the land, a single eyewitness can convict someone. 2 or 3 witnesses is, you know, you really got it, right?
Right.
So yeah, the question is why is that not like you're saying, plastered everywhere? Well, a couple things. So one is, look, I want to use this illustration delicately, but it makes a point. Let's take school shootings, for example. Horrible, can't think of a worse thing. I mean, it just is, it's pure evil and just a horror beyond belief. But look what happens. The first one we went bananas. Then the second one, we went bananas, and the third and the fourth, and each time we went a little less bananas on it. And now, do you realize I think there's been already 300 mass shootings, which is 4 or more people in our country since January 1st. Now, I'm not criticizing us. I'm just saying what it illustrates is the human ability to adapt to whatever is going on around us. And we frankly, we're driven by survival,
we're disinterested in it as much as we hear it. It makes us even more disinterested.
Yeah. And, think about this. When something bad happens in our life, even the passing of a loved one or something, you take a mortal hit, boy, it's terrible. But in time, the fact is life goes on, and we still got to pay the mortgage, got to go to work, got to take the kids to school or soccer and blah, 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 all those things. It's just inherent in humans. And I think it's that you're talking about, Kevin, is that it's out of sight, out of mind. We're on to the next thing. It isn't an indictment of that we're bad creatures or anything like that. It's just how life is and how it works, and we move on. But I will say, if you were here in Phoenix, the Phoenix Lights is still a big deal, and really thanks in no part to Lynn Kitai, who has really championed this thing, and every year there's a big celebration of it. She rents a movie theater, guest speakers, plays the movie, keeps it alive. I mean, I've done so many interviews on local news channels, the newspapers, the New Times, things like that on the case. Every year the anniversary comes, and there's attention given to it. And we even are having still an occasional eyewitness coming forward, like pilots and military members who had to finish their career out before they were brave enough to do it. And so it's not a dead case, and it is completely fascinating because, again, a lot of people aren't familiar with all that occurred. But in terms of the whole, is it a blimp thing, for example, what's reported is multiple craft over a mile in size. I don't believe we have anything a mile in size. I don't even know that we could construct it, that we have materials that would support the weight, even if it was a super fine fabric or something, to be able to do that. And frankly, a lot of people say, well, maybe it was, military testing stuff. I don't think so. I don't think there's anything man-made. And again, this is 1997. And why have we not seen anything like that since? And it was a literal parade. It was a parade over the 5th largest, at the time, probably 6th largest city in the country. And that thing just slow rolled low and slow, and everybody got a really good look at it. You're not going to do that with top secret technology. This is why you have places like Area 51. You test this stuff in those places. You don't want people to see. And I know there's lots of conspiracy theories. There's ones holograms and, all this other stuff. But when you look at the reports, it was a very dynamic, multi-object sighting by thousands of people over 4 or 5 hours from Nevada, Las Vegas, Henderson, all the way down to Mexico and New Mexico.
Thanks for bringing that up, because this wasn't like in a flash. This was something that lasted hours. And then the military, the infamous flares, which that's a freaking joke. And it actually rubs me the wrong way. Every time I see like mainstream media or anybody talk about it, they still show the flares.
Yeah.
That's not part of it at all.
Yeah. That's really 2 events occurred. So the sightings of the craft over several hours, as we talked about, and then those lights appeared just for about 40 minutes or so. So the craft were flying over to me was a parade. Those lights, if they were not flares, and that's been analyzed many times by various people. Take, for example, what they claimed was they dropped these LU-2B flares.
Do those hover in place?
Yeah, so they fall at a rate of 8 meters per
Speaking
minute.
English.
Yeah, sorry. So the rate of fall, they stood in place, long
8
story
meters,
short, way too long to be a flare. They should have dropped,
exactly.
right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then secondly, they wouldn't have stayed together perfectly. They would start to, I'm trying to illustrate this, but they would start to fall at a different rate, right? But if you notice in the video that they got, they stood there for way longer than any flare would stay airborne. So now I'm not saying what they were. I'm just saying that's what they were not. There was no way. Those were not flares, just based on a very simple and rudimentary logic, looking at the data on the type of flare that was dropped, just not possible. So,
okay. But not even just that. I mean, there were military people too, policemen, there were lots of people who would be considered very good eyewitnesses trained observers. And even my husband's a pilot, and he's been in the air for 37 years. I think he spent between 4 and 6 years in the air over his career.
wow.
And, these people, they see this stuff every day. They see the sky, they see the stars, they see satellites, they see whatever, other types of aircraft. And you can't just dismiss somebody who spends that much time observing and having to, for their safety and for their existence, to be ignorant. One of our guests who was there and witnessed it was Dave Spinks. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a paranormal investigator and owns a haunted house, and he's been on our show quite a few times. But he even said it was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. And anybody that spoke about it was pretty much dispersed from each other. They were told not to talk about it. And that to me says something unique has gone on, that the military wants them to shut up about. Because if it's not meaningful, then what does it matter what you say? And that part by itself means the world to me. Having worked for the military, and it just makes total sense. It's absolutely different.
Yeah, it's unexplainable. There's no logical way to explain it. I do feel it's probably the most important case, in our cadre of classic cases. It's because it is modern enough. And so many saw it, and just all these facets that we're talking about. So, yeah, it's a wonderful case, and I hope that it never dies out. And I hope someday we learn, what really was going on.
Yeah, in fairness too, I mentioned Roswell is the king, the Mecca, the gold standard. But in fairness, and no offense to you Roswell fans, we're only talking witnesses. What, a couple?
Yeah.
One?
Yeah.
The rancher? I mean, really?
Yeah. There's probably a couple dozen, and that case gets. There's probably a lot more to that case than we realize.
It was shut down really quickly.
Yeah.
Well.
Why would the government come out in the military and say, we've got a flying disc, and they put it
and then the next day they're like, oh, just kidding.
Oh, never mind. Yeah,
correct
to
me
me,
if
that's
I'm
a
wrong,
big
though.
red flag.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Shane. The Roswell, the crash was, because it's UFO World Day, whatever, it was July 2nd, but the military didn't show up until days later. And if this was some type of a secret or classified thing, it took the military that many days to. I guess I'm not buying that. Obviously,
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree with you.
No,
There's
yeah.
a lot of doubt in trying to explain it away. It's not easily explained either. But yeah, I think that is one of the problems, is limited eyewitnesses, but it still has good, strong evidence otherwise.
Oh no, I'm not discounting it at all. But when you compare the numbers, thousands to a handful, a dozen tops, maybe. Amy, with coincidentally, the Coast to Coast Radio was talking with a woman, in Phoenix, that described her encounters, multiple, with reptilians. Okay,
interesting.
Nice. You feeling that? You familiar with that?
I have. That is not an uncommon thing.
Okay.
I've had cases of that. Some really weird cases.
In Phoenix.
Dealing with reptilian. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now, I'm not. I'm not. I have to go off the evidence that I've seen, and here's kind of my philosophy. Again, I struggle between the whole nuts and bolts and then the woo-woo, the conscious, the non-physical part of it. I always struggle with that. However,
that might be the first time someone said woo-woo on this show.
Woo?
Oh, really?
No, it's not. That's what the Bigfoot people call talking about UFOs and aliens. They call that the woo.
Yeah.
And I always feel insulted.
No, the woo, but they didn't say woo-woo.
Woo-woo?
Oh, yeah. Remember the old 50s movies?
Woo-woo,
yeah. That's where that comes from. But yeah, here's my base philosophy is I just say, look, anything is possible until it's proven not to be. That's kind of how I operate, right? So if somebody has had that kind of an experience and with the reptilian, I wasn't there, I'm going to believe you, of course. Okay, that's what your experience was. However, I can't myself go and say, hey, there's such a thing as reptilians, unless of course I had that experience. Then I would say that, right? So here's my thing. I think that the data and the evidence and the people who bring it forth that are going to really crack this thing open are actually the experiencers, more than just eyewitnesses to a UFO or a craft or something like that. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That this is not just a physical phenomena. It's a non-physical, and the non-physical is actually the greatest part of that. But what that is, I cannot yet say. But I think there are many possibilities. There are possibilities of, a biological entity getting in a machine and flying from somewhere else to here. Possible. Now that there's a lot of obstacles to that from a scientific point of view, the sheer distance. But then we're operating on only our known physics, and we're just now peeling the onion of quantum mechanics and quantum physics. What have we yet to learn, right? So again, that's why I struggle with overly critical people who just dismiss this topic, because we are only aware of a portion of our reality. And I say that with full confidence, and here's why. For example, the light spectrum is this big, right? But we see about this much of it. So infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, blah, 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 they truly exist, but we don't see them. We are limited. Now, we've developed technology that helps us become aware of it. But do you see what I'm saying? So there are things right now happening around all of us that we're not interpreting with our eyes, okay? And it's also true of our ears. Dogs, for example, can hear a greater range than we can, right? Taste, touch, smell, all of our five senses are sensors that collect data from our physical environment, and our brain creates an interpreted reality for us to function and exist in. But the fact is, all three of us, we interpret reality differently. We think we're all having the same experience, but we're not. We all see it a little bit differently. We experience it differently. So how can you be dogmatic and say these things cannot exist and cannot happen? You can't. To me, that is less credible than somebody who says, well, I don't know what it was, but this is what I saw or experienced, right? I'm going to believe that than the person who says, no, you didn't. That can't happen, so you didn't experience it. That's not right. That is not scientifically a correct thing to do. It's just not the human thing to do. You know, we need to approach this with respect, and people who have had these experiences with respect. Of course, you're going to have a small percentage of people who are hoaxes or some mental illness, or people who, want attention. Okay, all of those things happen, yes, but not 100% of all sightings are that, right?
Right.
And then we have film, and we have video, and we have radar imagery. We have physical evidence. We have chemicals. We have radiation. We have, a tree with broken branches and a big skid mark in the ground and burnt plants. I mean, come on. That's reality. We have to take that into account. And that isn't always a misinterpretation. That's real stuff.
So how do you differentiate between credible and less credible sources when you are investigating for MUFON?
It's more of an art than a science, I would say. And it takes experience and skill and people skills and to help understand. And, it's what they're saying and how they're saying it, when they're saying it, why they're saying it, body language, the circumstances. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it can be done. And of course, I always say an investigation there's three pillars of an investigation. One is the eyewitness. An eyewitness, I think, is the most important because it tells you what happened, where, and when. And that's where you collect the data, the what, where, when. Okay. So they can provide you that, and you can corroborate their testimony scientifically with some of the tools I had mentioned before, right? But if you can't. If that data doesn't exist, that happens too. It's just an eyewitness account. But for that reason, I think eyewitness account is the most important part. However, it's probably the least reliable, right? Because it's human beings. So you've got to couple that. You know how I said multi-source, everything you read and see, watch and all that, you got a multi-source. So the second thing is any kind of physical evidence. And so I'll say it, a video, a photo, radar imagery, those are forms of evidence that, coupled with that testimony, they can corroborate each other, right? And gives that more credibility. And then the third thing is actual physical evidence. And that's rare, but it does happen. And that is the things I just described, damaged trees and plants and a gouged ground and chemical traces and radiological traces and all that kind of stuff. And again, you put all three together, then you've got a strong case. Any one by itself, frankly, a video or photo to me is next to worthless unless you have the testimony that goes with it, because that contextualizes it, and that is so important. So again, it's not an exact science. It's a bit of an art. And again, I will reemphasize, as an investigator, I never dogmatically say you saw this or you didn't see this. What I say is, look, based on the evidence I have at my disposal, I think the most likely explanation is this or that. Or I will say, there is no reasonable explanation. This is an unknown.
Have you ever gotten to a point where you were like, I need other investigators to take a look at this?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can tell you a case, a specific case. maybe I can even show you a picture that is pretty interesting. This case
You could
was
probably send it to Kevin by email if you want to
That
share it.
or Shane, if it's
Oh,
on
yeah.
your
It's
computer,
on his phone.
oh, it's on your phone.
Ooh, pretty. Okay, where is that? Where is
okay.
that?
This was in Sedona, Arizona. Here's a close-up of it.
Oh,
Beautiful.
Okay.
Okay.
So to me, this is one of my best cases. And so the context, here we go. So you just saw a picture, right? By itself, But now let's talk about why that I believe that is
give
very
me the
supportable.
details.
The person who made this observation and took this photo was president of the Firefighters Chiefs Association in Arizona. Very credible man. Some years ago, we had a disaster here in Arizona, a brush fire, and lost 18 firefighters called the Granite Mountain Firefighters. Horrible. And in fact, he buried them, and it made him retire. But this is one credible guy. And he was with his wife and 2 adult children. And Jerome is this little quaint mining town, has, a haunted hotel and stuff like that. And people drive up there for the view. And where that photo was taken is a very common viewpoint. I've been there myself. And you'll look out over this valley. And they just walked up and they took a quick shot like that with their iPhone. And they noticed a little flash of light around them, but, just dismissed it. Later, when they looked at the photo, that image appeared in one frame. So in an iPhone, if you take a photo in live mode, it's a 2.5 second video. And this is where the case really got great for me. So I broke that photo down frame by frame. There were bugs and birds that were also in that video. But so imagine this. So at 30 frames per second for 2.5 seconds, you have 75 frames. Well, that image only appeared in one frame. Now, the birds and the bugs, you could count. They came into the view like 6 or 8 frames, and when they went out, another 6 or 8 frames, right? So there was a difference. That was not a bug or a bird because of the distance it would have had to travel to be in the center of that image. It would have been in multiple frames, but it wasn't, right? So it appeared for an instant and then disappeared. So for me, this case, based on the credibility of the observer and because the technical aspect of the breakdown of that video was very credible. So, and I thought, this is a very important case here. I'm going to get some backup on the video. So I submitted it to our chief investigator. He reviewed the video and he said, well, maybe it was a bird or a bug. And I explained, no, and here's why. And then I sent it to the MUFON's chief photo analyst, Mark D'Antonio. You guys might be familiar with him. He looked at it and goes, well, I don't know. It's kind of inconclusive, but, maybe it's a bird or a bug. And so I'm like, I'm getting a little frustrated here because I discounted that. In the video, you can see a bird and a bug, what it looks like. This did not look like that. It didn't perform that way. It was not a bird or a bug. So being that frustrated and being that confident in my analysis, I decided, I don't know if you guys know who Bruce Maccabee is.
I know the name.
Maccabee. He's a longtime optical physicist for the Navy who has been involved with UFOs for 30 years, 40, 50 years. In fact, he sadly just passed away earlier this year. But I was acquainted with him, and so I sent it to him. And if you ever see any of his work, what I got back was a 5 or 6 page analysis with mathematical formulas and all sorts of stuff that frankly went above my head. But he said, Shane, you got yourself a genuine UFO here, in my opinion.
You got a bona fide UFO.
Yeah. And I closed the case as a true unknown. And to this day, I'm still quite confident.
As a true unknown. Exactly. It's unidentified.
People don't know what it is.
Yes.
But it ain't a bird or a bug. It's not an airplane. It wasn't the planet Venus, blah, blah, blah. And And I'm pretty confident if I went down the street and showed that picture to 100 people, there would be not too many that would say that's a bird or a bug. You know, so, but, you know, again, I'm not going to be dogmatic. Yeah, nice. Dogmatic, but based on the evidence that I had and the analysis that I performed, confirmation to your point, Tiffany, consulted other specialists. It was basically 2 to 2, I guess. But that is the kind of investigation that I think yields the kind of results we need to have.
On a couple of your 2 for 2s, the 2s, I could tell you, I won't say the name, but he was on a past. Was he on a past show of ours? And Tiffany, where hold on, Brent, your husband, brought up an image or something, and he immediately discounted it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And this
yeah,
is again, her husband, 30 plus years in the sky, 37. Yeah. He's a captain.
Yeah.
As you just said, I never put the math together, but that's crazy. 4 years of his life in the sky,
in the air, in a plane.
And
yeah,
that's a little bit more experience than yours and mine, Kevin.
Exactly.
I have to believe him over some Yahoo who's just looking at an image that's still.
Yeah, and this is that's where some of the frustration comes with MUFON. You know, you make a report, you're convinced that, you know, it's something special, and they come back and say it's not, right? That's kind of offensive, and you know, I try and handle
it.
It
almost sounds like you don't have the right pedigree. You can't do that. You know,
yeah.
Like
I think what you'll find is that there is a conservatism within MUFON investigators, who many are law enforcement and military, a conservatism there that the organization wants to be viewed as credible. And so if you're gonna err on one side or other of the line, you're gonna err on the side of caution and conservative. That may be kind of what's happening. But I will reiterate, even if me saying that this one, like this case, I'm confident that it was a true unknown, I might not be right. But with the evidence I have, I really think I'm right. So again, this is the frustration with UFOs. I will say, if people are interested in it, don't get into it because you want to find the answer. That if you're expecting to resolve it, I don't think it's for you. You're going to get frustrated and worn out and tired because we have not got there yet. But I'm kind of like, it's a cliche, but it's like, it's not just the destination, it's also the journey. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, again, working with people, there's a true phenomenon, no doubt about it. And it's impacting people. And that's what interests me. And yes, I am curious and I want to solve it, but that isn't my only motivation, I guess what I'm saying. My motivation is, yes, to identify what it is. But in the meantime, until we get there, you know, there's people at stake, you know, their lives, their you know, their soul, their being, I mean, this can be
their fears
really
and their sanity.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's I get all of that, but let's get into a little bit about some of the experiences that you've investigated where there were beings present. Can you talk about some of those that stand out to you as being sort of aha moments where you're like, holy crap, these have entities, there are other beings, they're not fully human. Tell us a little bit about some of those stories.
Yeah, I had one case when it was my first abduction case, and it was what we call a star team case. Mm-hmm. It was deemed to be highly significant, and so a team of people was dispatched. There were 4 of us. I was the lead interviewer. We had a backup interviewer who actually is a police officer. We had someone that was the videographer, and then we had sort of our legal person and filling out forms and that kind of stuff. And this person, this was a really unique case, and still is unique in for a couple of factors. So the woman claimed to have been raped by reptilians. Okay, that's the basis of this. This was a person that she knew. She was involved in, let's say, the healing arts. He was involved in the healing arts and more. I'll get into that a little
When
bit
you
later.
say healing arts, are you talking medicine like in a traditional sense, or are you
Yeah,
talking more spiritual?
Yeah, more spiritual. You know, everything from Reiki
Okay.
to
Holistic and natural
holistic, and
okay.
then even
Spiritual.
some. Yep.
Okay.
And these two were acquainted for many years and kind of were off again interests with each other. Well, apparently the relationship had come to a point that they separated. She actually submitted a report to the police. A police report was made. We
Dang.
had the
That's harsh.
documentation. She, in fact, went to court, and the court awarded her a protection.
From an alien? How is that possible? Okay, now you're getting into the realm of, okay, I'm not with you on this one.
Yeah. So she felt that what he was, in fact, was a reptilian.
She didn't present that to in the.
This was all in the court record.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And so,
man, this is
That's
a little
kind of
bit
unprecedented.
That's a little bit more unique than I've ever heard.
Yes. And then so we met, conducted the interview. She had wounds, fresh wounds. She had gone to the hospital, had documentation there. You know,
did they get semen samples?
Bruises and burns, yes.
They got semen samples from the reptilian.
No.
Okay.
No.
This is just a little bit out there, even for my belief.
It's very out there. Then what also occurred, they were in different cities, towns, and she had claimed that. So he was also into voodoo, and she had claimed that he had made an effigy of her, poured gasoline on it, did not light it, but that she, in another city, had reeked of gasoline, even though she had not physically been exposed to it.
Okay, I must have missed something. Who is the male?
This acquaintance of hers, this man who she had known for years. So what I'm getting to, the denouement, is that the rapes occurred at night, and it was not just him, but it was other reptilians that appeared and did this, whether it was, you know, physical or spiritual, that we really couldn't ascertain.
Okay, so
But
you're
that was
saying
her
that
claim.
she had a man who physically raped her, but she's saying that the man was actually a reptilian, and his reptilian friends came and raped her as well.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm on board. I gotcha. So,
Okay.
so
I had to build up to that.
Yes. Okay. So there was a physical confrontation multiple times, right, with the same entity, and she took the guy to court, but she's saying he transformed into a reptilian. He's not human, is what she's claiming.
Correct.
So how did that go in the court system? I mean, there's got to be a public record of these events. Did you all look into any of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
She told the same story.
Did they do a psychological evaluation? There should have been one done with the court system.
I don't believe that they did.
The judge usually requires, when there's something like that, a mental evaluation.
She got an order of protection, so how that happened, I'm not sure.
That's because he's a physical human.
Yeah. So yes, my interpretation would be that the police and the courts viewed him as a human,
Yeah.
and dealt with it from that perspective, even though her claim was out there. And
Okay.
with us, she's really reported to us because she felt that we would accept the notion of the reptilian and part of that experience. So
Kevin, your thoughts? I want to
we
hear them, Kevin.
we
Finish
recorded
your thoughts.
everything.
Go ahead.
We conducted the interview. We gathered all of the information and data, and we called it an information only case. We did not render a decision or what we call a disposition in this case of being real or not real. Okay, because how could we? Right? And we're not going to sit there and say you made it all up, you're hoaxing us, or you're crazy. We didn't have evidence of that. We just had somebody coming to us telling us a story with some unique evidence. Like I said, police report, court order, bruising and burns, and there were things, but none of that was proof of or evidence of a reptilian individual or individuals conducting that activity, right? So
I mean, assuming they did the DNA sample, I'm sure it came back human.
Yeah. Now, what's kind of an interesting little side point to this, a year or so later, I was watching Netflix, and there was a documentary called something about a Hale cult in California in the 80s. Can't remember the name of it, something Hale. Anyways, that dude was in that video, in that documentary.
The person that she said raped her?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's not surprising either, because they use sex as a control tactic.
Yeah. So, not a good guy, right?
Yeah.
Not
Already some issues there, but maybe he see, my thing is, women are very vulnerable. Like I said, I'm a fragile flower, right? I think that women can be abused and mistreated, and you do that enough, and your mind can break. So when you keep saying these guys have raped me and nobody's really listening, there's a lot of trauma there.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that we could call them beasts. We could call them beasts. That doesn't mean that they're reptilians. Just because she's taken her mind to a place where it's explaining his bad behavior, maybe more than anything else. So, but interesting that he would be in this cult that you ended up finding. But that also shows that they are in the knowledge of mind control, and that is very, very strong. In that situation is what it sounds like to me. And I'm not a professional. I have no skill whatsoever. I'm just telling you from a woman's point of view what that's meaning to me. Not that 100%. Have the rapes, not that she wasn't abused, not that this didn't happen, but you're saying that he's in a cult, and we know that mind control is a huge tactic.
Yeah. So this really illustrates the limitations we have. So we are not mental health professionals, right?
Do you have any because there have been psychiatrists all throughout it, everyone from
no, I think, are you saying
within MUFON? I'm saying within MUFON. Do they have?
Yeah, we do not. So the experiencer resource team, of which I wasn't a member at the time.
I think I was just thinking about John Mack.
This case, all we do is refer them to mental health professionals if they request it. And we're not involved. We just say this person accepts people who have had these experiences or feel that they have, and will help them. Okay, so we don't have staffed psychiatrists, and we don't get in there and do that. I mean, how could we, right? That's the
sad part, but that's just, when you look at MUFON, you see a reporting site. There's no support. There's no I mean, other than getting it off your chest and telling your story, which can be very therapeutic, but it doesn't make the night terrors and the fear and the anxiety go away. And in fact, it might actually
make it
continue
worse.
it and make it worse.
Yeah. That's why we're extremely careful and don't offer that. We what we do offer is a hearing ear, a non-judgmental hearing ear. And just as you said, many individuals, that's enough. Just get it off their chest to someone who's not going to ridicule them, and they're good. And I would say the majority are like that. But then you do have people who are traumatized. And again, we don't recommend, what we do is we just say, this is available to you if you think you would like to have that contact with a mental health professional or a hypnotist or just a support group. All of those things may help, but it may hurt, right? So we don't advise them, is what I'm saying. We listen to them, we let them get it off their chest, and they often will ask questions. Have other people reported this? And we can say, yeah, sure, that's a common thing or not, and help them get their head around it. But it's extremely sensitive, and we just keep our boundaries pretty firm on that.
Yeah,
for that very
Tiffany,
reason.
This story with the female who went to court, got the protection or the order. I mean, in fairness, I mean, it sounds so over the top, but I can say her name, Geraldine. I'll say her first name, Geraldine. We've had her on the show.
Okay.
You know who I'm talking about?
I do.
Okay. She was part of a documentary. She had the same really encounter where the guy, it was a dude, and then
I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but how many times have you heard of someone going to court and trying to get that person?
No,
locked
that
up?
part. Okay, I was getting.
That's very unique.
That's very unique. Yeah,
and
I'm not saying that the experience isn't unique. I'm
Yeah.
saying that the legal process.
Well, with her thing, if correct me if I'm wrong, with Geraldine, it was consensual.
Correct.
Where this case, she's reporting
It's abuse.
rape. Yeah.
Right.
So, and if you buy into the notion that the aliens are here and they've been here and they live among us, then why wouldn't she be dealing with a human until he showed himself or whatever. So, that's
like I say, anything's possible until it's proven not to be.
Yeah. Wow. We had a lot of questions in here. Well, there was something that was
kind of a downer. Sorry.
No.
It's not. No, it's just one of those difficult things to discuss. It puts up all of your antennas.
What's this? I'm kind of going through some of the chats or comments, and I like to share a couple questions. Ever hear of Project Snowbird? I don't know that. What's that?
I do not.
Okay.
I have heard it before, but actually I don't recollect what that one is.
Okay.
Maybe they could pop that in the chat and just
Yeah, let me see. Did this
maybe it'll jog my memory.
I'm looking. Got way behind on these chats.
I know.
Here's one. Just different question, Amy. Why does it seem that the measure of credibility varies from one MUFON case to another?
Yeah, just the individual circumstances and context of that person and their experience or sighting and that. So, like, there's one thing called you may have heard this term, a flap. A flap is like a burst or a number of reports on a single event. We just had one here May 22nd and 23rd here in Arizona. We had over that 2-day period about 24 reports. and of a very strange thing in the sky. Well, again, 12 people reporting on the same thing. Woo, that's some pretty good credibility, right? You feel like then there was something really there. We don't know what it was, but definitely saw it. But it turned out through our, technique of investigation that what these people were seeing was at 9 p.m. on both 22nd, 23rd, there are SpaceX rocket launches, one in Vandenberg and one out of Cape Canaveral, that were actually visible from Arizona. And
Damn it, Elon.
yeah, that Elon, he's an alien too. No. Anyways, that's an example of, okay, so on an individual basis, each case was investigated mostly by different investigators, where you may or may not feel that person was credible, depending on their personality and circumstances and stuff. But because there were a number of reports, they gained credibility because of the kind of the confirmation of the event. So it's just circumstances like that. I mean, it's really hard. And you know what? I am not a judgmental person by nature. I don't like it. I don't like to judge people or their actions any more than the normal. We all have to, hey, is this person, nice or not nice, or, good
Safe.
or not good, safe. Yeah. All those things. But I'm
mine's
saying,
always a safety issue.
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of girls in my life. My two granddaughters, my daughter, my wife, my mother.
And
we all live together, and I've been well trained by the women in my life, so I know what you're talking about. But so yeah, it's very circumstantial, and like I say, it's a bit of an art as much as a science. But you develop that skill set. You're not right 100% of the time, but that's that, right? That's life.
Here's the Snowbird thing. Snowbird was a SAP huge chevron-shaped craft built for the Air Force, blimp-type crafts with secret propulsion system. Mm-hmm. Okay, and follow-up. Apparently, it had a malfunction, flew back to Nellis over Phoenix. Flares were used as distraction and excuse for cover-up. So UFO Cholo, good name, is this your way of saying that it was it's a man-made, I guess that's what he's, let's see. Yes, very possible. An interview, a top physicist in space aeronautics said they recognized the technology. A blimp versus a V-shaped object, though. I mean, assuming, Cholo, you're talking about, you're putting the Phoenix Lights as this Snowbird. I don't know if that's what you're saying. I can't go through the chat, but they didn't describe. No one ever described a blimp type object. It was a V shape with light, everything like it. And then the governor said it, who initially
he was a
joked
joker
about it,
begin with.
but later he came clean and acknowledged. Now, granted, I kind of get his point. I mean, you're in office and he probably, wanted to get reelected. And, but then afterwards he said he saw it.
So which one do you want to believe? The first version or the second version? At that point, I don't have any trust in you at all.
Yeah.
That's the tough part.
There's no, there's no proof of that either. So, however, I will say, for example, there's a company called Aerostat that has built the world's largest blimp. It's in California. I've seen it, and it's impressive and it's huge, but it's not anywhere close to a mile. It's not anywhere close to being the same shape. And it's the latest and greatest technology. So remember, 1997, 2007, 2017, 2027. So we're almost pushing 30 years ago that this is the latest and greatest blimp right now. You know what I'm saying? So, and again, I will go back based on the size, the performance and shape, there is not something like that in the public eye, and even privately. I would venture to say, you go ahead and talk to some aeronautical engineers and let's see what they have to say about the possibility of a craft being over a mile wide, flying only a few hundred feet off the ground silently. What materials would you make that of? What propulsion could that, indicate? All of that stuff. I mean, if you're going to apply the same criteria of judgment against my side, my belief that it was not man-made, then we should apply that same criteria to man-made, and you would have to prove it to me. And here's the deal. I get that the government is producing technology now that if we saw it, we would think it's 30 years in the future, right? So I'll take, for example, the F-117A fighter plane. That was actually on paper in the 70s, built in the 80s, and wasn't revealed until the first Gulf War in 1989 or 90. So it was already 20 some years old. And we're all like, whoa, look how space age that looks, right? So I get that. Or like in computers in 1965, the NSA had computers with like a 650 bus speed, and that didn't hit the consumer market until like the year 2000. So 35. So I get that, and that possibility exists. However, prove it. You know what I mean? You got to prove it, just like I got to prove it, and bring your evidence forward. Now, I'm not saying this to the listener who just, I get that there's all sorts of information out there, Project Snowbird or Project this or that. And yeah, SAPs are the new thing where, to me, that is ripe with misinformation. Hey, you can, I look at it this way. You can't explain one mystery with another. You can't explain one secret with another secret. That's not evidence. That doesn't work, right? So, and when you think of the logic behind that, it makes no sense. If you have this expensive
I'm going to say
technology, you're not putting it over a civilian population. What if it crashed? What kind of liability would be on the government if you had a mile-wide craft that just took out, a whole freaking
neighborhood?
A whole neighborhood or whatever, right? Now, I just, sorry, that logic doesn't compute.
And again, unless you got mass hysteria from thousands, a few thousand people, no one ever said a blimp. Yeah. They all described a V-shaped object. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't know, but that's just, if that is the narrative with the Phoenix Lights, then GFY. You know that acronym. So well, not per se to you, but the whole narrative, that's bullshit.
Yep. Calibrate your BS meter. Think these things out. Test them.
No, I'm not.
Do research.
Yeah. And if it is our government or our military, whatever, that created in 1997 had a mile-long object. If that's the case, I don't think we've seen it since.
No. That's my other argument. This stuff would accidentally be seen. Again, with the internet and with the people like us that are so interested. I mean, I've been to Area 51.
And the technology you're exposed to also.
Yeah. And then, people who are in these programs and get out, and, we have whistleblowers. There's a problem with whistleblowers in that, it's not proof, it's just more evidence, but we're not having, a lot of that type of explanation come out. Now, I'm sure they don't want to expose their SAPs either and call undue attention to them. So I get there's incentive to be secret and keep it secret. And I think that incentive is certainly stronger than parading it over the fifth largest city in the United States. So It just makes no sense to me, that logic. And there are a lot of people who feel like, like the Tic Tac, that was ours, but when you look at the details, that Tic Tac went from 80,000 feet to 50 feet in 0.76 seconds. Kevin Day was the chief operator of the radar system that tracked that. That equates to like some 800 G's of force.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know that there's a material on Earth that could sustain 800 G's of pressure. Put that on a diamond, it explodes, right? You know what I'm saying? So again,
and it's definitely not there. There's no way that a human could handle that. But so, are we talking unmanned aerial vehicles? Is
likely
the norm?
unmanned, I would think.
Or what we're talking about is a physics we don't understand.
True.
Mm-hmm,
Is there a bubble around that so that pilot, if there was one, but the reason I talked about the material is because that a human or a pilot of any biological form would be turned to vapor, a mist, liquid, if that, with that kind of G-force. But even the craft itself, there's no object that could be, sustain that kind of force, no material that would allow that to exist and survive that. So it is something radically different, either a completely different physics or materials or something that we just don't have our heads around. So
Tic Tac, 2004, Fravor, what's his rank or whatever, Commander Fravor, David Fravor. Again, 2004, he tells his story. It comes out in 2017. He has told his story, mainstream, wrote all of it. And he's acknowledged to this day, he hasn't seen, I mean, if that's man-made technology, military technology, I don't know, maybe he would have got the memo eventually.
He didn't see what?
He didn't see, what do you mean? What?
You said he didn't see, but you didn't finish the sentence.
He didn't, okay, I lost it.
He's never seen anything.
He hasn't seen it
like
since.
that.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. And again, I would think that, maybe one of his buddies up the food chain would have been like, Dave, stop talking.
Yeah.
That's ours, but that
You're
hasn't
right.
been,
Yeah.
I would think, maybe, but
even the United States Navy and the DOD have gone on record and said, that ain't ours.
We don't know what it is.
We don't think it's China. We don't think it's Russia. No. There is
we're in trouble if
no
it is.
force that has that technology. Yeah. It's so far beyond. We don't think anyone else. So they are saying officially that this is a true UAP, an anomalous thing. So I don't think that's up for debate anymore. I mean, honestly, that's not even shouldn't even be an argument. We're not talking about, is it real or not? It's real. We just don't know what it is.
Or it's a blimp that could go that fast.
Super fast blimp. It's an SSB
over the Super Bowl. That blimp, the Goodyear over the Super Bowl, it just flew by. What the hell is that? Okay, we're about 2 hours. Let's start winding this down. I got real quick. You're a musician, drummer. I love music. What kind of music? What's the genre? Give us a little.
Oh boy, well, I played since childhood, and so I played in everything. I've been in the symphonies, marching bands, rock bands, stage bands, jazz bands, concert bands, all of that. And I'm 63, so for me, I was a kid in the 60s and teenager in the 70s, and to this day, I'll admit it, I love disco. Disco was awesome, and from a percussionist point of view, disco is really interesting music. It uses samba and just all sorts of really complex percussion rhythms and things that just make it so fun and fascinating for me. I love to listen to that. But I'm also like, hey, AC/DC and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff is, absolutely love it. Aerosmith. I remember getting the Toys in the Attic album when they first came out in '76, maybe. My bedroom was in the basement and I had a full drum set and stereo system and just love to just spend hours and hours doing all that. And then I have had my drum set up until a few years ago. I actually blew out my shoulder, torn rotator cuff playing my drums.
Oh, wow.
I have 4 rotator cuff surgeries, 2 on each shoulder. I had to give it up because I just, I got to work for a living, and I have a horse ranch too. So I have a full-time job here doing this, but I also have a horse ranch, 6 horses, and there's bales of hay to buck and poop to scoop and rake, and just fences to fix and pipes that are broken. I need to have some physicality, and I kind of had to give it up for that sake. But I it's still my first love for sure.
That's awesome. Cool. Tiffany, final thoughts, questions?
I guess as we wrap up, what kind of message or insight would you like to leave our listeners? Would there be any moments of significantly impacted your beliefs on UFO theory? Is there anything that you would like to just leave us with?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I would just say, use your head, have an open mind and an open heart. UFOs, UAP, unexplained things are happening around us all of the time. It's a part of the fabric of our life. Don't get hung up on terminology, angels, demons, aliens, that's all, supposition on our part. But don't let that detract from the reality. And so just keep your feet on the ground, your eyes to the skies, open heart about it, be receptive. But, don't, have your mind so open it falls out on the ground, right? That old cliche, right? So keep your wits about you, be logical, but don't be so skeptical that you become the opposite and don't believe anything, or question everything to the extent that you're lost. You have nothing. You're nowhere. No. But just be balanced, I guess. And I don't regret getting involved with it. It has been so interesting. It's helped me grow as a human being, expanded my mind, my heart on issues. It's put me in contact with really cool people like you guys. And I just absolutely love it. And I highly recommend, putting a little bit of your interest into it. You won't regret it.
Well said. In the show description, you can find Shane's. I'll put your Facebook link. I also put your Amazon book link, but also MUFON.com.
Awesome.
So, Shane,
good.
Pleasure was ours. You need to get home, sir.
Yeah, the sun's almost going down now.
There it is. Okay. All right, Dracula, you can head home now. The sun.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It was a ball, and it was great to get to know you guys some.
We'll do it again, sir.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shane, for sharing your information with us and for joining us on this captivating journey through the universe's mysteries. We were blessed with your presence tonight, and we had a little bit of conversation going on the side. I don't know if you saw it. You're more than welcome to go through and answer any questions that we missed.
Yeah, I see that. No, that's very cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and have a good evening.
Okay,
Thanks,
great. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
Right. We'll be in touch. Thanks. Shane Hurd doing it tonight with us. Tiffany,
I wanted to. If I had thought this out a little bit better, Kevin, I probably would have gone more into the experiencer side because I really like delving into some of those.
And I have purposely kind of stayed away from that because
Mhm.
we kind of gravitate, or I do. I'll say
Mhm.
I gravitate to your experiences, and it's
Mm.
not. That's not what we need right now.
Right. Yeah.
But he shared a few experiences, which that whole thing with the court. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's actually terrifying, and I can't imagine actually having to go through what she went through, and then go through a court system, and that process is very victimizing. So it's not that I have a problem with the experience. She actually went through something, but the idea that she would think that it was reptilians and that would come out in the context of the court system, it just seems so bizarre. I can't imagine anybody actually experiencing that and listening to her story and being able to do it with a straight face, just because I've seen how people react. It's not, I've seen the legal process, and it's not very becoming, and it's very damning. So that had to have been a very traumatic experience for her to go through. So
Amy,
that's
the
not
urge
cool.
to procreate or go through the motions
Right.
is strong in you, and then she
True.
perhaps, should that type of case occur again,
Reptilian
reptilian
human.
human intercourse, question the female about this factoid: all male snakes have two penises. Rather, they have two. Okay.
Hemipenises. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I didn't know that, but thank you,
Now
Amy,
we
for
know.
sharing. Now we know. Yeah.
Now we know.
Now I'm going to
Uh,
have to go and catch a snake and try to figure it out.
you do. There's got to be one in your backyard
There's
somewhere.
tons. They're all over the place.
They're all over.
Yeah.
All right, Tiff.
But
Again,
I think
another.
she's relating the fact that a reptilian is, maybe snake-like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So next week, we're going to have a great show with Charlie Raymond and Lindsay Raymond to discuss
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
Bigfoot.
it.
Yes.
Will Brent be joining us then?
I'll have to check his schedule,
Okay.
but
do that.
it's a possibility. I think that it's on there. So,
Okay. All right. Appreciate everyone in the chat for hanging with us. Questions, comments, and all that good stuff. This is one where I know MUFON gets a bad rap from some people, but in not that I have to defend Shane. His background as an engineer, I mean, he had all this going for him, his professional working
correct.
life, a long time before he got into this, and he seems to have brought that mentality to this. So, yeah.
I doubt that very many people are MUFON as their first job. Do you know what I'm saying? Like this
Yeah,
is
I don't even
a
know.
bunch
I
of.
don't think they get. A lot of them do not get paid. I don't think they get paid at all, unless you're at that
I have no idea.
upper level. So
We'll have to look into that. Is that going to be your real job from now on, Kevin?
MUFON?
Yeah.
No.
You're not
I'm
going
an
to go to.
enthusiast. I don't want to do
okay.
all that dirty work. I'll let someone else do it and tell us about it. All right,
Yeah.
Tiffany, take us home, please.
Thank you for joining us with Universal Secrets. Tonight was a great night to broadcast our information on MUFON and the investigation process. And I'm glad you were able to join us with our guest, Shane Hurd. And this is Tiffany Mack and Kevin Hale, and we are out.
Peace out. This has been Universal Secrets.